Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Today is going to be one of those really impactful beast mindset shows. Check this out. Imagine your life being tormented over and over and over for 10 years. You're young, you're ambitious, and to constantly be told things are just things that, let me call it what it is, domestic violence. How do you get out of a situation that's been impacting you for 10 years? A lot of us might say, why don't you just walk away? Easier said than done. But more importantly, when you do find the courage to do it, how do you recover emotionally after you've been beat down verbally, mentally, physically? A young lady who's on our show today has definitely walked this path and took pain, suffering, and turned it into triumph. And not only that, resonated to do a lot of other extraordinary things in this time of conflict. I'd like to welcome all the way from Australia. And she's known as the financial goddess. Good reason why, because she's doing a lot of stuff financially to help people. I'd like to welcome all the way from Australia, the financial goddess herself, Margaret. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, everyone.
You know,
Thanks for
I couldn't pronounce the last name, but when you said you're known as the financial goddess, I said let's just go with that. So welcome to the show. Y'all were in Australia. What time is it in Australia right now?
It's 6 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday.
Wow. Wow. I think in Australia,
15 hours time.
Everything is different. Like you guys' Christmas is different than our Christmas. You guys' summers are different than our summers and blah, blah, blah. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Let's get right down to it. Let's tell the viewers a little bit about who you are before we get into this, how you came out of this 10-year domestic violence situation to actually do some extraordinary things. Who exactly is the financial goddess?
So I was born in Poland and I came to Australia in 1995, originally with my mom and stepdad, and we're based in Sydney. And that was the start of my journey, experiencing completely new culture, learning new language, and adapting to my new home.
Your mom and dad are what nationality, if you don't mind me asking?
They're both Polish.
So what took you all the way to Australia though? I mean, that's a pretty pretty different culture shock, so to speak.
It is. My stepfather was already an Australian citizen. He was previously married and he had two children that were living here in Sydney. So he couldn't imagine settling with my mom in Australia, being so far away from his children growing up.
Mhm.
And as such, we've made a move to Australia so that he can have ongoing regular relationship with his children.
Was it difficult for you to adjust to the Australian lifestyle? Because I mentioned, if you heard of Avalon, you said it's on the other side of Australia. We know Sydney. What is it like in Australia for you coming from Poland to there at such a young age?
I would put it down to an absolute culture shock. Everything that I knew, the language that I knew, the traditions that I knew, all my friends, I had to leave all my friends and the rest of my family behind. And that was the hardest part as a young person, because everything that you know as your identity,
Mhm.
you have to rediscover within the context of your new environment.
What was some of the challenges for you that I know you left your friends and had to start a new life, but what were some of the challenges that you had to persevere when going to Australia?
As in, after we've arrived?
Yeah.
Yes. So, one of the first challenges is the language barrier. I spoke very little English. And so when you don't speak a language, people cannot see what's in your heart and what's in your brain. And sometimes your language limits people's perception of who you are. So the original phrase I learned was, "I'm sorry, but I don't speak any English," and then smiled at the end. And that was my very initial introduction to the English language, which was very limiting and made it incredibly difficult to create new friendships or to get to know other people better.
Let's move a little bit forward to something even more traumatizing. You was in a domestic situation for over 10 years. How did that even occur for you?
So I moved out of home into a youth refuge when I was 16 years old. And I met who became my first husband. I've met him there. About 2 years into a relationship, he's become increasingly controlling to the point of violence. There was red flags there at the age of 16, but
What
I
were
was too young and too naive to pick up on that.
what were they? Now that you look back, what were those red flags?
The first thing was that he was overly critical of me, of everything that I did, and of my appearance. And being young, I took it as a sign of love that he's being honest with me. He's giving me an honest feedback so that I can improve. So
Mm.
if he says that, my cooking is crap, well, that's an opportunity for me to improve. It's coming from a place of love. If you're saying I'm overweight, then it's opportunity for me to work on that. And it just became an increasing nitpicking. The other thing is, very early on, he became possessive in a sense that I couldn't go and have friendships. He was very jealous. So I couldn't go out with my friends. He would be checking my phones, he would be checking my emails. Once I started working, he would time the time that my work finishes and how long it would take me to come home. And if I was so much as 10 minutes after that time, he would be very upset and I'll have to explain myself to him.
Was he ever complimentary towards you during those times? Did the criticism outweigh any term words of endearment?
Well, it's actually interesting because it felt more like a roller coaster ride. He would tell me every day that he loves me while doing all these other things, which made it increasingly difficult. And for the more severe situations where it did get physical, uh, and we had multiple breaks, I would walk away multiple times at the early stages of a relationship. He would send me long apology letters with words to the effect that you don't know what you've got until it's gone, and asking for another chance, an opportunity to do better. So it was a cycle where he would try to fix his behavior, be nice, caring, all these promises in the world, how much he wants to work on himself and how much he cares about our relationship and then our family once I had my son young. Once he would get comfortable that I'm not going anywhere, he would go back to his old behavior patterns. And the time frame would be anywhere between 2 weeks to 4 months, which is the longest that he's gone on behaving well and respectfully.
Some people, I know you were young, but over the course, how many times did you take him back and why did you take him back? I mean, couldn't you if it got to the point several times that you left, why didn't you just go home and keep refuge with your family? And why would you keep taking him back? I'm just curious. I mean, it's probably a common question that people would ask.
Absolutely. So, first of all, I had no family to go to. The only person that I had living in Australia was my mum, which at the time I had a strange relationship with her because of the relationships that she was in. So, me going to my mum's and staying there was not an option, and I had no other family. He's isolated me from any friends and ability to make new friends. So, that was not an option. The only option I had was to save money and go and stay in a hotel or at one point in time stay in women's refuge. The first time that I walked away, I was actually 7 months pregnant with our first son. And we were going through the court system. There was police were charging him with violence, and he was a young man at the time, 19 years old, and was starting his I guess career as a security guard. And one of the requirements to become a security guard is that you cannot have criminal convictions. So he spent a period of couple months first tracking me down to the women's refuge where I was staying, and then working very hard on trying to convince me that he'll never do this again, that this is his one chance of having a future and earning income. Security guards here in Australia get paid relatively well and definitely above the minimum wages. And he's made promises to me that that's his opportunity to provide for his family. He didn't want his son to be raised without a father because that was his backstory. He was raised by a single mom. He knew what it felt like. And within that whole context and my context of being raised without my own father, I felt like being a young man at the age of 19, he's allowed to make mistakes and perhaps he's learned and he's ready to grow up. And if he starts this new career as a security guard and has his son born in the next couple of months, maybe that will be a turning point. That's what he needs to change the direction of his life.
What was his lifestyle like growing up? Did you I'm pretty sure now because you do have children by him that there was moments that you literally look back to check out his DNA. What was his lifestyle like outside of not having a father? Were there red flags inside the household that you now look back and go, "Wow, I should have seen this"?
Look, not really. Originally, when we met, we were the same age. So I was 16 and he was 16 when we met at the youth refuge. The only thing that I can pinpoint at the very early stages, Andre, is perhaps the fact that he's dropped out at the end of year 10 and his circle of friends that they all left school early and neither one of them were focusing on their future. But again, when you look at the circumstances, that's not necessarily a red flag because I moved out of home at that age and I've managed to continue with my education and stay focused on wanting to do better than that environment.
How did you both wind up in the center to begin with? What was the change of events that occurred to lead both of you guys in that situation to begin with?
So I'm not exactly sure of his direction outside of the fact that he came to Australia and was also living with his mum. And somewhere along those lines, within the first year of him coming to Australia, he ended up being there in a youth refuge. For myself, my mom, where I was living wasn't safe for me to stay because of relationships that my mom was having that were becoming quite unsafe for me as a young woman to stay in that environment.
Mhm.
And so at one point in time, I walked myself to the police station because I had nowhere else to go. And I knew as a young female being on the streets, it's even more dangerous than at home. And the police just made a number of phone calls, found a place for me in a refuge that had a vacancy and drove me straight there.
When did you guys decide? Is there regulations that you have to stay there for till you're 18, 21? How did you what? guys wind up deciding that you wanted to get married? Was this a way to get out of the refuge thing earlier than what the mandated Australian law said you have to stay there?
No, so the Australian youth refuges take children from the age of 12 to the age of 25. They have transitional houses. So first you are in a crisis accommodation for the first 3 months. Then you're moved on to medium-term accommodation where it's semi-independent living. So in a crisis accommodation, the counselors and the youth staff, there's always somebody on shift 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's the first 3 months. After that, once there is a vacancy and you've moved into the mid-term accommodation, it's semi-supervised. So you still have a social worker that you work with, but you're given more independence and you're learning life skills and you're going through counseling and whatever it is to help you in your individual journey to become fully independent adult. And then you can move into their long-term accommodation where you can stay usually around 2 years, but it's not up to the age of 25 years old. Once you hit the age of 25 years old, you need to go somewhere else. For me, that was not a consideration because when I finished high school, first thing, I got a full-time job. And when I was working full-time, first thing I did was rent a place. So by the time I was 19, I was privately renting. So getting married to what became my husband was not a reason for me to move out of refuge.
When did you guys decide to get married? About what age were you guys?
It's actually quite a funny story. We were about 24 years old, and the only reason my ex-husband decided to actually propose and get married was because of his best friend. So we had our son, who was 4 years old,
Right.
and then our daughter was born in August, and he rang his friend, really excited to share the news that he's having a second child. And his best friend said to him, "And when are you going to get married?" And he then turned around and said, "No, marriage is a really big commitment. So I'm afraid to take that step. I'm afraid to get married." And I think his friend made him realize that having a child and a second child is much bigger commitment than a marriage. It's your lifetime commitment when you have a child to be present in their life.
Mhm.
And I think there was perhaps a light bulb moment that was triggered by sharing that news of our daughter being born, that he's realized that the fear of commitment should not actually be an issue for him to go ahead.
Were there any signs of trouble with the first child before marriage? Because now you're having another child by him. Were there any signs leading, any signs showing up then? Because evidently you guys are doing pretty good. I mean, you got a child, you still communicate. Now you're
Mm,
pregnant again. I mean, were there
mm.
any violence or any red flags?
The main red flags were about control. And in the early stages, once I had my son, his view of the world changed to more traditional view. So when we first were in the relationship, he was more about equal partnership.
Mhm.
We both can cook, we both can clean. Once our son was born, his views became more traditional in the sense that it's now all my responsibility. So I was studying, I was working, I was looking after my son. He was too embarrassed to even push a pram to a childcare center to drop
What?
off our son. Uh, he just felt it's unmanly to do that, which was a very big shift after our son was born. So everything became my responsibility. However, he did not honor the traditional part of men being a provider because while he was studying part-time and decided not to work. So then I had the financial pressure of being the primary breadwinner while also being a mom and trying to build a future by continuing with my education, which, to be honest, would have been a lot easier if I stopped working, stopped studying, and just decided to live off government benefits, it would actually, I would have been in a short term financially better off, which is unfortunate.
When did the when did the situation turn to the point that 10 years, when did it start getting really, really to the point that you had to leave?
I think honestly, there was a number of times where I felt that I should go, but I had no way of going.
Hmm.
Once you have a child, you need a safe place to go. At
Hmm.
that point in time, most of the refuges were at full capacity. Once again, because I was cut off from family and friends, I had no ability to just pick up a call and ring someone and stay with them.
Hmm.
So it took 3 years of strategically planning my exit and aligning my checklist to make sure that at the point in time that I make the move,
Hmm.
that I don't have to worry about the obstacles that were in my way in previous occasions when I did attempt unsuccessfully to walk away.
You mentioned something that I hardly ever heard from individuals, and let me also say thank you for coming on and sharing this story. I know it um, definitely right now I can see that it's bringing back memories. But you just said something. You had to strategically lay out a plan for action. What were those plans that you executed?
The first one was to set up a separate bank account that he had no knowledge of existence.
Hmm.
Um, we had, although we had one joint account once we had mortgage after my daughter was born, but prior to that, we never had a joint account.
Mhm.
At this point in time, I needed to have an account where he didn't even know that it existed, because any account I had, he would want to know internet banking and password and have access to it. So that was the first step. The second step was to start putting money into the account to work out how much I need. Because whilst there is a lot of domestic violence services and
Mhm.
there is financial counseling, there is nothing out there that helps the woman to restart the journey. And when you're first walking out the door, you need everything.
Mhm.
You need a lot of funds to be able to stand your ground, whether that means funding to stay for an extended period in a hotel, whether it means you need money for clothes, for transport, for a different mobile number, or whether it's renting a place if there is enough vacancies and having money for the bond and the initial weeks of rent and some sort of furniture. Even if you're buying secondhand, that's still money that you need to have. So these were very important steps for me to take. I then needed to seek legal advice in relation to children being able to have relationship with their father and how I can make it happen while still maintaining my safety. I sought counseling for myself and a counseling for my children, and I strongly focused on getting my master's degree and starting my own business, which would give me flexibility to work around the children while being completely independent from any boss or from my ex-husband.
When you say domestic violence, we hear that a lot. You mentioned the things that he done basically were isolation, verbal degradation. Were there any physical altercations involved with a 10-year span?
They they were infrequent, but there was a number of quite serious incidents that took place that involved police.
What, I don't know the law in Australia. What is what is the common practice if he puts his hands on you and the Australian authorities come? What's usually the protocol? Because you dealt with this for 10 years. I mean, and I completely understand if you have no resources, but it seems to me that if there was a physical altercation, that the courts in the judicial system would put a restraining order in place, allow you to stay in the house, and still force him to contribute towards the living conditions, the fact that you got kids. Is that not how the system works there?
I wish it worked a lot better. And since I've left my relationship, there's been some improvements to the system. The first time that we had the domestic violence situation where it got physical, I was 7 months pregnant, as I've mentioned to you, Andre, before. And he actually sat on top of me and strangled me to the point of passing out.
Wow.
And when I opened my eyes and recovered, he was just drunk dancing in the living room, and I snuck out of the house. At that point in time, when I went to the police station, they initially took it very seriously. I was taken to a woman's refuge. He was arrested. When he was begging me to come back and I was about to give birth to his child and so he could get his security license, he's asked me to go and drop charges. And I think there was a triggering point where after that moment, police was no longer taking my complaints as seriously, because once I went and wanted to drop the charges, and they refused to drop the charges because they were serious, and I didn't want to continue with the case. I was about to give birth to his child. I had to go in front of the court, and I refused to testify against him at that point in time. And I believe there was a turning point in my relationship with the police. We
Mhm.
stayed in the area for a lot longer, but all the future calls that I've made to the police and all the future assistance where I went to ask the police, I wasn't taken anywhere near as seriously. The standard of proof got raised, that high.
Mhm.
And it was basically at the point that it's your evidence, it's your word against his. It was quite frustrating to be let down by the system to that extent. The very last instance that we had, we had a mortgage, we had our two children, and we're going through what's called an AVO, apprehended violence order, that would give restrictions into how close he can come into contact with myself and the children. And there's a lot of different conditions on the document, one of which would prevent him from returning home with us. His lawyer, through the prosecutor, asked me, they said, your ex-husband is happy to agree to all the conditions except for this one. And I looked at them and said, I can't believe you're actually asking me that. If you allow him to return home tonight, if you remove that condition from the AVO, it makes all the other conditions useless. I'll be dead by the morning. I
But
can't believe you wouldn't consider it as a serious risk to my harm and to my children. If we're expected to be in courtroom today, he's issued with AVO, he's charged, and then tonight he's got a permission to return and stay in the same family home where I am staying with children. Just does not make any sense.
okay, so I'm really wrapping my head around this. So how do you feel about the law enforcement or the system when you refused to press charges and you went back repetitively?
Mm.
I mean, do you blame them for not taking you serious? I know it's a double-edged sword, don't get me wrong, but what do you think you should have done differently now that you look back on that? Because they're not going to put you on high priority if you're going back into the same situation.
Right.
So now
That's
that you
correct.
look back on it, what would you tell somebody now that what would you have done differently?
What I have learned over the years is that the moment when there is no consequences for someone's actions, those actions escalate. And especially in the situations of violence and abuse, it starts small and then it builds up over the years. So my advice to anyone would be, you know, no matter how much you're willing to forgive that person or give them a second chance, I still believe that they should suffer the consequences of their actions the first time that they cross the line, because that might be just what they need as a wake-up call, not to continue the abuse towards you.
Mm.
Definitely do not drop the charges. Just allow the law enforcement to do what they need to do. Take it outside of your own hands and say, I've done what I needed to do. I've reported it. Now it's in the hands of the law enforcement, and let this person deal with the consequences of their action and let the letter of the law prevail.
You finally see light at the end of the tunnel. How did that make you feel? And what was the first order of operation for you on that?
Once I knew that I was ready to walk away and I was preparing for that decision, there was an unexpected turn of events that meant that things turned out a little bit different. I was running a business from home, and my husband at the time, who's now my ex-husband, destroyed all my client documents, and he's destroyed all my university degrees. He got drunk, got upset, destroyed everything before taking off to his mother's place. When I saw that, it was a big wake-up call that I can't continue to focus on the future while this man is proactively sabotaging my ability to do something for myself and for the children. At that point in time, I felt like we were going around in circles where there's all these promises taking place, nothing changes. So I've reached out again to the police. This time I changed the locks in the house. I went and saw lawyers straight away, family lawyers, to deal with the parenting side of things. Out of fear for my safety, I had to connect a security alarm with back-to-base monitoring. So I had security monitoring. I had 2 panic buttons. One was inside the bedroom in the wardrobe, and one was close to the kitchen where the main entry to the house was. And that was all putting measures in place, securing all the windows, installing lights, motion activated lights in front of the house. I changed my routine. So rather than having a fixed routine that someone can get easily accustomed to and caught you off guard, I would be more unpredictable with the time I was leaving the house, the time I was returning to the house. Sometimes I would go and stay at my mom's place. Sometimes I would ask my mom or one of my friends if they wanted to stay for sleepover, that there was somebody present. So I tried to make it as difficult for him to be able to plan any attack or any type of revenge.
I'm surprised. I haven't heard you say that you was in fear of your life. Were you ever in fear of your life? Or at this point, did you become fearful?
Absolutely.
Because you mentioned a lot of security stuff right now. So was this when it really changed and you became fearful of your life?
I became afraid of my life and really taken it seriously a few months before that situation occurred, because it was his birthday, and because he had a drinking problem, I've asked family members not to give him cash. And since the house needed a lot of renovations, our family focused on just giving him Bunnings gift cards, which is gift cards to a warehouse where you can buy all the manly tools that you would need to fix up the garden or fix up the house. During the birthday, he walked out. He was gone for a couple of hours, came back. He came back with a bucket, a sponge, a shovel, and a rope, and some sort of bleach cleaning product.
Wow.
And in front of the family, announced that that's for me so that he can bury me in the background, in the backyard, sorry, and that nobody will ever find my body. And he was sober when he said that. It was the first time that he's made threats to me while being sober, and first time where I saw him physically take steps to buy things that effectively could be utilized for that purpose. So yes, at that point in time, I've realized that things have escalated to the point that I need
got
to get
witnesses
out.
now. You got witnesses now. Did they call the police?
No, so the witnesses were just our immediate family.
Nobody was
I
willing to
guess
come forward and say, "Hey, This guy clearly got buckets, bleach, ropes, shovels,
No,
and then he's going. Nobody went and said anything.
no, they turned it into a joke at the party and tried to just redirect him that he's missing out on his birthday cake.
We
They
need
took it
a
as a joke, effectively.
we need a minute now because this is that's crazy. But you knew he was serious.
I knew he was serious. I think part of the problem that perhaps the family didn't take it seriously is because I've never disclosed to them what was happening behind the closed door. So up until
Mhm.
that point in time, they did not know. When I had marks on my neck from strangulation, I would cover it with foundation and wear turtlenecks. I would always cover up for him because I was embarrassed and ashamed of that situation. And I think perhaps that's the reason that they didn't take him seriously, because they didn't have that context of what was actually happening behind the closed doors. And that can change people's perspective.
Okay, let's move forward a little bit before we run out of time. You get out of that relationship, you start your life all over again. Um, what happened with him and you currently? Like, how did you manage to dissolve all of that? Because it seemed like for the last couple of years, it seemed like it was a situation that couldn't even be dissolved. What did you do to dissolve the situation and to be able to move on with your life?
I've taken a lot of steps. Where it's now at the moment, it's 9 years of no contact. So we live on opposite play. We're not even in the same state. At present, he had no interest in having a relationship with the children once all the courts went through. So we went through 5 years of courts, through parenting orders and through various AVOs and settlements and divorces. Once all that took place, and once it was proven in the court that he's not safe to be alone around children, that he's got some problems that he needs to first address and seek treatment for, where he can then move on to supervised time with children and then unsupervised time ultimately with children. He's just disappeared from our lives. And I've moved from Sydney to Cairns. So we over 2,700 kilometers away from each other, and have taken every step to maintain that distance.
That is great. On a lighter note, you're doing some remarkable things with your life. You're doing some truly remarkable humanitarian things for a sad topic. And we can talk about that real quick. And your role with the Ukrainian children. How did that come about? And give the viewers a little bit more insight on it and what they can do to help you in your quest for a humanitarian for other children.
When I first saw the news of the war breaking in Ukraine, Andre, I did not sleep for a week because I felt like, as many of the audience might feel, you want to do something to help elevate the pain, but you feel hopeless being so far away. So you're getting distressed by the news.
Mhm.
Once I started working with Rotary, we had an international convention last year in Melbourne. And some of the representatives from Ukraine came to that convention and showed the footage and the reality outside of what the media and the propaganda is, of the realities of the day-to-day existence. That led me to an opportunity to build a relationship with the Rotary Club there in Ukraine, in Cherkasy, and another Rotary Club in Kharkiv. It's another part of Ukraine. And we started proactively working together with our club here, Rotary Cairns Sunrise, where I was president at the time, as one of our major projects to get fundraising and to get access to Rotary International Foundation emergency relief grants to help make a difference in the lives of those children.
That is truly remarkable. And you're doing something else. They call you the goddess, the financial goddess. How did that come about? Tell me a little bit about the title and what you do and why you wind up creating the financial goddess program.
So the name financial goddess is actually a direct translation from the Roman goddess Abundantia, that is now renamed Fortuna. And that's the ancient goddess of prosperity and wealth and luck. And I felt that I've built up enough skills and passion in that area where I can help other people, because truly you can't live life on your own terms
Mhm.
if you're not financially independent. It's whether you're coming from a domestic violence situation or
Mhm.
whether you have a boss or a job that you don't like. If you're stressing over money, that would lead to directing the decisions and choices you're making in life. You're in a survival mode. The moment that I can help you, whether it's you as a business or you as an individual, to create that financial freedom for yourself, you can truly reach your own potential and you can be the best version of yourself, doing absolutely anything that you want. One of the focuses of the program when I work with business owners, and they just said to me, I want to make more money, I want to have greater profit. I turn around and say, well, what for? You want to buy another holiday home? You want to have another bling bling on your, on your rims? That's not the kind of people I like to work with. I like to work with business owners that want to leave their own legacy behind. You've made profits, you've looked after your family. What is it that you can do that will benefit the rest of the world? What are you passionate about? It could be mental health, it could be environment. What is it that now you can give back to the community now that you and your family are taken care of, and you're happy with that?
How much of your past, the trials and the tribulations, went into both of these arenas for humanitarian acts and financial stability? How much of this from your past and hurt has been brought into these two sectors?
I firmly believe that my diverse personal experiences, from being a single mother, domestic violence, being a migrant in the country, they have helped me to build resilience and the determination that I need to be able to succeed and to help guide and inspire other people to help them achieve the same. They can look at me and say, if she's overcome that, I
Right,
can do it. And sometimes it's just a matter of showing people how you've done it. It might work for them, it might not. Everybody's circumstances are different.
right.
But I'm hoping that I can create more of a ripple effect out there in the world.
How can the viewers reach out to you for all of your knowledge and understanding that they can overcome obstacles? How can they get in contact with you?
Um, I'm active very much on the social media. So you've got Financial Goddess website, financialgoddess.com.au. I am also on a YouTube channel. I've got about 7,500 followers at the moment, where the focus is on business advice and financial empowerment. So it's just Financial Goddess YouTube channel. You can Google that. You can search that. I'm also active on Instagram, and whether it's under the real Financial Goddess, as someone has sneakily taken out the Financial Goddess name and search just by my name, Margaret Milutinovic. I'm also on LinkedIn, and viewers can reach through to me that way.
I want to take the time to say thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing such a beautiful story about perseverance and overcoming and basically taking back control of your life and then, like you said, causing that ripple effect. Um, Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crayton show.